hell with this. Yo, you tripping, fam?
Cruz, what's going on?
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm really excited to talk with you about it. First question I just want to kind of jump in with is, what are you watching right now? Like, is there a show that you love, not Chicago Fire or one of the Chicago franchise, but is there something that you're just like really into that you've been streaming or watching recently?
What I recently just finished actually was the Shogun series on Hulu, which I thought was just unbelievable. And what a lesson in brevity, you know, like I couldn't help but, because obviously it's mostly subtitled. So when I was watching it, I couldn't help but notice how few words they were really using and how much the imagery and just kind of looks between people played. And that was just, I think, a real lesson. But I mean, just stunning. Like, I'm obsessed with it. Like, I couldn't get enough.
It was so good.
And RuPaul's Drag Race.
You're just all over the spectrum there.
I am. I have a very eclectic taste. And we discovered RuPaul's Drag Race about 4 or 5 months ago. And like, it's like we're on like season 14 already. Like, we can't get enough of it. It's so fun.
Yeah, people love it. Shogun is also an amazing book. If you want to dig deeper, if you haven't read it, that's a fun read. It's a long.
I might. Thank you for that. Yeah, I definitely might do that. It's like I
you
love
get deeper into the stuff, but yeah.
I mean, they did such a good job with that show.
They really did. It's so good. So jumping into Chicago Fire, you are an OG. Like, you've been on it since the beginning, and the industry has obviously changed a lot, but so has the world around us, like in this period of time. I'm curious, how has that for you impacted the character, the series? Are you aware of how like the cultural changes and the things that have happened in the industry too, just like strike, like everything, like has it impacted you guys? Or are you guys kind of like able to just kind of sustain? Like, how has it impacted the work, I guess, and what you feel like the kind of storylines are?
Gosh, I mean, I suppose just on a very kind of practical level, filming through COVID, and then the strike directly after that, the hardest thing to watch was how much it affected our crew. All of these people are often working paycheck to paycheck, and that was a real struggle. And in terms of like the acting work, yeah, I mean, how could it not? I mean, especially the COVID season, that was insane. And like just having to deal with a mask and masks constantly creating marks on your face. And it was a whirlwind for sure. I would say this is our first season that feels kind of back to normal. And in general, it's been a real pleasure. Like this group specifically, that we're currently on, that are currently the firefighters and paramedics. It's like, it feels like the alchemy of that group is very similar to when we first started. There's like a really great energy in the room, and everybody's really bringing everything they can to the table. I would say we've had one of our most adventurous years as a show in terms of what the writers have been bringing to the table. It's the first time we've had a crossover in years, and of course I don't get to be in it because my character ended up being suspended for 2 weeks. But it was a tremendous success, and really a 3-hour movie more than a kind of crossover show. And 18, which is something we just shot. I think it'll be coming out in about 3 weeks or so. I don't think we've ever told a story that way. And that I know we've never told a story in the way we're going to tell it. And just to be able to kind of explore how to tell a story in a different way this far into something, right, is amazing. And lastly, I'll just say in terms of my character, that having done this, for 13 seasons and having grown from like a single guy living with a roommate who was kind of bumbling around through life to a father of 2 who is now like an acting lieutenant on the rig of one of the most prestigious companies in the city. That alone, will inform how you kind of navigate through an arc of a character. But what's great is you never know, right? Like season to season, it's like, well, how am I going to grow or regress this year? You know, and yeah, so it's almost like I'm with you guys. I'm with the fans. Like it's like I'm learning really just right before you what is going to happen to this character, and that makes it always exciting and interesting and new. And yeah, it's I mean, it's the joy of my life, man.
There's so many things you said that I would follow up on that I couldn't even keep track of them. But one of the things you mentioned, it's been kind of an adventurous season. I feel like for Joe, it's been not Joe, you, but also Joe the character.
Yeah,
like it's been an adventurous season too. The suspension, the callback, you know, that episode which a lot of people list as one of the great episodes for the character, but in general of the series.
Wow.
Where you guys try to, where you're debating whether or not to help, and you help the guy, and you go in, and then they're like they catch, and there's gunfire. Like it's pretty intense stuff. It's a morality thing, and you've seen the character grow. I guess the question in that is like, how do you get stressed out about what's going to happen to him? And like, how connected are you? Like, oh man, I missed 2 weeks, and like, I don't know what's going to happen next to this guy, or like, are you, like, do you kind of a fan in that sense, like hanging on it?
100%. You know, like it's like, I always tell people I feel like I have the best job in the One Chicago universe, because my character specifically you've gotten to see so many sides of the guy, right? Like, really, the birth of like the character's ethos was born when he left that man to burn in that building. Like, we really didn't know much about Cruz before then. But you know, within 3 seasons of that, you're finding out he's like a Zumba instructor. Yeah, like it's like it goes. I run the gambit of, you know, as an actor, I get to play the drama, I get to play the romantic scenes, I get to play the action, I get to play the comedy, I get to be like step into all of those things. And now looking back, it's like, I think that's what's made him so well-rounded. I think that's why people really resonate with Cruz, because like just yesterday I was talking to somebody who is this lovely young, this lovely mother figure at this kickoff party for Paper Flower, and she was just saying, "Oh my God, I love you. You're the nice one." It was like, which I think is just so silly, because we are all in our own facets nice, but I just think, you know, I just think that they've seen so many sides of him that like they feel like he's a brother, you know?
He is vulnerable and human.
True.
And some of the guys are a little crusty. You know what I mean? Like, so
that has its
easier
own
for us, I
vulnerability,
think.
you know? I feel like you learn, like, the fact that somebody is crusty or maybe a little bit aloof or closed off, you know, that's just more often than not some sort of weird defense mechanism, you know, except for Herman.
Yeah.
Herman is just a pain in the butt. There's no denying the fact that he's just I think Novak this year had like one of the greatest lines, which is like, it's amazing that even no matter how good his life is going, he's still just cranky.
Yes.
Like, it's like,
Yes. That's also good. That's also from, I think that's the same episode actually, where you access a humanity, I think. Like, you can see the pain sometimes with Joe.
God,
like, you can see the struggle. And I think that it's partly because the way the character's been written, you've been allowed to go through it and grow up. He's been able to grow up on the show. He represents a different part of society, too. And that's kind of interesting. And I want to talk about your movie, too, your short. But, like, because you mentioned it. But I'm curious, because we've seen him grow and we've seen him kind of deal with his past a little bit. Do you feel burdened or challenged at times, like, to try and bring some of that into the ecosystem of this show, of this franchise, you know, that like has dealings with his brother and stuff like that, and like kind of walking this line sometimes? Like, how does it feels like you have to bring something that some of the other characters don't in that respect.
Interesting. I mean, yes, you know, there's no denying that just because the makeup of who I am, there's going to be sort of cultural references and points of interest that are worth exploring in any drama. I do take a great amount of responsibility in terms of specifically his vulnerability. You know, I've often said there are so many Latin male characters in television and film that don't ever express any sense of vulnerability. It's always they're the hard ass, or they're the gang leader, or and I think it's not a fair representation of who we are as a culture in general. I actually think that we are some of the most soulful, vulnerable people ever. And so to be able to kind of pinpoint and live in that aspect of the character is something I take really seriously, is something that I enjoy being able to bring to life every day. But at the same time, I grew up in the neighborhood that Cruz grew up in. I came from a really tough place, and I was mugged several times as a teenager, and I've had uncles and cousins and stuff who were involved in gang life. So it's not too far afield to think that just because one human is a certain way and has gotten themselves out of that life, that there aren't people very intertwined in his past life that have. And so that's what I think has been great. Is like I've never really felt very much so that anything sits outside of reality with Cruz. It all feels very believable. It all feels like a universe that I'm very familiar with, and thankful to really not be in that ethos, in that area of the world anymore. I do take. As a matter of fact, after 2020 and when I developed my production company, which is really about opening up and allowing visibility and inclusivity and equity to people who otherwise don't have those opportunities, I ended up adding the tilde to my last name. I had never really had it before that, and
oh wow, I didn't know that.
It's like for like 9 seasons, there was no tilde, and that wasn't necessarily. It was sort of an afterthought until my mother passed away in 2018, and then my sister directly after that in 2020, and I sort of became the steward of our culture and the oldest member of our family, and I realized that I hadn't really held on to any of it, and so this is that getting that tilde is just kind of one small way to sort of try and regain access to that part of my culture.
Especially though in such a visible way, it's such a visible thing that your last name and where it's seen, and and it's I think it's an important thing to do, to recognize and the character, because he's got dimension and complexity and vulnerability. He offers a version we only get usually. We often get stereotypes, or we get part of it is the nature of storytelling, that there's you only get a character for a little bit, and so you only see one or two sides of them. But with all these seasons, he's been allowed to breathe and be human in ways that expand because this is major mainstream television, expand the perspective people get to have on different kinds of people. And I think that's kind of one of the beautiful things about the role and the way you've played him. So I commend you for that.
I mean, my goodness, man, this is, let's continue this interview forever. I could go, go down Compliment Road as long as you'd like. But, I think in general, that's one of the things that has given the show as a whole longevity, right? The writers have been so good about, specifically about leaning in on who the actors behind the roles are. That has really given an opportunity for everybody to sort of really live in the character in a way that's familiar to them and allows them to be as multifaceted as possible. And you never thinking, well, okay, around season 13, I'll decide to be this way. Because you never know how much of the character you're going to get to explore. But there's been so many facets that we've seen from Kid and that we've seen from Severide and Herman and Mouch. I think Mouch's journey right now is so interesting because he himself is kind of going through an identity crisis and trying to figure out what he wants his legacy to be. And as somebody who is a more seasoned firefighter, with kind of limited years left before retirement, to see him kind of grow in that way and to tell a story where we're saying, the potential for you to grow doesn't have to end at 50 or even 60. You know, like it's like there is always a way to grow. And
that's
the more
also
that you
big
fight
for
for
the.
it. Sorry?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's also huge for the audience, right? Because there's people of all ages watching, so that's a window
Exactly.
into like
Exactly.
it's a proxy.
Our greatest point of pride, and this has happened to almost all of us, is at some point some fan will come up to us and be like, "Oh my God, you guys are the only thing that the whole family sits down and watches," and we're there for 3 hours and we don't move and no one calls us because they know don't bother, and it's like how lucky are we that we get to be a part of, anyone's life, let alone a full family, and bringing them together for something like that's a point. That's a great honor for me.
It's an increasingly small amount of stuff that everybody watches together, right? Like like things are more and more fragmented where everybody's watching their own thing on their own device. So like that is it used to be normal and the common thing, but now it's like an increasingly small slice that Chicago Fire does occupy. I want to talk a little bit about Paper Flower because I think what what I'd like you to share with us, with the audiences out there, is the motivations and some of the intentions behind it. It's a very powerful idea without having seen it yet at an interesting time for it, I think. So I'd kind of like to know about the motivation to create it and have you share a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny. The timing, I would like to say that, we were able to kind of have our finger on the pulse, but it's like this has been a project that's been in development since 2021. And unfortunately, it feels like this is going to be, an issue that will forever plague people of color in this country, especially immigrants. It spoke. Well, I'll start here. Back in 2021, I started a screenplay competition through my production company, Mass Epiphany Studios, which garnered a couple of winners in the short and feature category. One of them was Paper Flower, and then a million things happened. I experienced some personal stuff that I was going through, some pretty high anxiety, but then we finally got an opportunity to bring it up onto its feet. And it spoke to me specifically because I am a dreamer. I am a first generation American born of immigrant parents. And what was amazing to me was I knew the world. Like it took place in the 90s. It took place, in a low income setting, with a family that was in a house that was too small for them, and two parents that are continuously just, caught up in the grind of trying to make it every day. But what was really beautiful about it was that we were getting to sort of see the idea of the American dream visualized through the imagination of children. And especially what I thought was fascinating was that the sort of the crux of the film leans on a commercial for a theme park, and Great America specifically in our film. And a child's ambition to want to go to Great America, and not being able to because there's no money and there's no way of possibly affording that luxury. And the answer to that is the older son, who I like to think of as kind of like a little Mexican Spielberg, because he's constantly carrying a camera around and filming his sister doing stuff. And it is his imagination that propels the movie forward by telling her that if she just draws a little flower on a piece of paper and plants it, and the next day a flower grows where she planted it, it means she went there in her dreams. And it's like, what are we not doing as Latin parents and as a Latin community, but just reaching forever for that American dream and hoping, and it is like any success, I think, by an immigrant is built off of hope, and knowing that and never for them. It's always for the generation previous. And I find that to be such a noble cause and such a noble way of thinking about life. And it helped me explore, just kind of the struggles my mom went through. And so that was some of the motivation. Beyond that, it was like, I find this city to be, as much as I love it and as much as I love working in it, and I've been here for 20 years, it does not get the credit it deserves for the artists it has. And so I really wanted to be able to just make something that hopefully will grow and be able to highlight more and more artists from this city in the future.
You know, I started off asking about the timing, but the way you answered it makes it seem far more universal as an experience, regardless of time, to anybody who's coming over at any time, because there's been various waves of immigration, all built on the same kind of hope and dream. And I think that it's actually more powerful if you frame it in that sense, that this is kind of the great America metaphor, but this is that universal thing, really.
Yeah.
That like there's a hope that people have when they come here at various times,
you know,
and various
and how
generations.
hyper commercialized it is, you know, like how like we are sort of even spoon fed what the dream looks like, you know, and so it's like, so we think we know what we're trying to reach for. But yeah, it's so it was just such a joy to be able to explore it and to direct in general. You know, I didn't realize that I would enjoy it as much as I did. But to be able to just have your hands in so much of a story you're trying to tell it's just so much fun. It's so exciting and terrifying all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, you know, you've been around, I mean, because you've been on set so consistently, I imagine some of it starts to just trickle in, or you're picking up ideas as you're watching because you're there all the time for years. But it is obviously very different. I'm curious, I want to go back to Chicago for a second, because we talked a little bit about, you talked a little bit about the cast and where it is right now. And you guys added a big piece this year in Dermot Mulrooney. And it seems like from the outside, you guys really function as a family, not just on screen, but one assumes that there's some connection with the team and with the process. And I'm curious to hear you share a little bit about that and about adding in a big piece like him sort of into the crew, and then how it all kind of works, like how you guys find the dynamic, you know?
You know, the dynamic found us. I think, you know, everyone sort of brings their own piece to the puzzle. But without a doubt, these people will be a part of my life forever. You know, especially the OGs, as you put it. Like, those guys are the closest thing to family that I have, outside of my very immediate family, my wife, basically. And my, you know, so it's like, whom I met on the set of Chicago Fire, and is also like tremendous friends with all of these people, you know, and there was Eamon Walker, back season 1, when we first booked the show. There's a great video that goes around of, like, I think it was like the last night that we were filming, and we finished filming at like 3:30 in the morning, and filming the pilot, excuse me. And we finished filming at like 3 in the morning, and then we stayed up until like 1 in the afternoon, just like drinking and having fun, and, you know, and like knocking on like Monica's hotel room at like 8 a.m. and like getting her up, and she's starting to play the ukulele, and, you know, and then he has this video where he was like, you know, this is what I chose to do, like, you know, and then just ended up by saying the alchemy of us, and there is an energy, there is a chemistry that is undeniable that we cherish. And as new people find their way in, that alchemy, they either find a way to attach themselves to it and sort of add into the mix, or they don't, and you don't see them very much after that, you know, like, and it's like, you know, but you think, it's like, for example, like Miranda. I remember Miranda coming in at the end of season 3, and I was like, oh, this girl's gonna be with us forever. And the same with Hanako. Hanako had an even more interesting story, because she kind of came in as sort of a, you know, just a filler for a couple of episodes that they're trying to figure out and negotiate what's going to happen with that role. And it just, there was no denying that, like, this, so she just fits. She just fits. Daniel Kyrie is another example of that. He was supposed to be a firefighter that was going to be in for 2-3 episodes, not make it because he couldn't cut it out. And Christian Stolte did the first scene he did with him, and immediately he was like, we can't let this kid go. Like, and was eager to voice that. And so, you know, like, it's so funny how that works with ensemble chemistry. But it is palpable. It is incredible. Sometimes it takes us a little too long to get things done because we are constantly busting each other's balls and just having a good time. And it is the most joyous set I've ever been on, and I hope we get to do it forever.
It's funny because you say the alchemy of us, kind of referring to the beginning, but that's night one essentially. So like that says so much about what created the lasting. Because we on the outside we watch and there's reasons, and you think we like the characters, we care about what happens next. I think there's also a lot of comfort for people in watching a group of people solve problems. Like it's a very comforting, thing. And you come back over and over again and it kind of reminds us it's possible. We can get together and solve problems.
I think that's right. I think it's that we really try to exemplify hope, but hope that is specifically derived from people working together. Because and I think that that's one of the greatest values that the show has to offer is the idea that it's like we are stronger than the sum of our parts,
Yeah, different kinds of people too might not necessarily click, and then they click together in this circumstance,
Yeah, exactly.
I think that one of the things you mentioned that you want it to go on, and everybody does, but you don't always know. How much do you guys know about where things are headed, and how does it change? And maybe we'll wrap kind of here because I know we've been going for a while, but I'm curious. What you have maybe goals or hopes for the future of the characters, for you, for Joe, but for everybody has them for each other. And then do you get to have some kind of conversation about like, this is what I'd like to see or what I'd like to do a little bit. And then but you're not sure, right? Like how far ahead do you really see? You mentioned at one point, like, I know a little bit before the rest of you, but like, yeah, the stress of that, but also the curiosity for all of us.
Yeah. I guess for me, I don't necessarily find it stressful, solely because as an actor, I relish, getting something new and fresh and having to attack that, and in terms of like the growth or the change of the character, I am definitely a performer who likes to like let the writers create their world, and then I will do what I can to tell that story to the best of my ability. If I find that something is like, oh my God, I just don't know, I can't get it out, I don't know how to say it, it doesn't make sense to me, I will fight to make it make sense, or we'll come to a point where I'll be like, I need help here. Like, I just don't know how to make, but those are tiny moments. Those are like blips, that like, for the most part, when I receive a script, especially a Cruz heavy script, I usually go, okay, I understand this. It makes sense to me. It makes sense in our world. It makes sense for the character. And that's because we've had such talented people to, kind of script the words in the first place. When you have faith in the people that are giving you the words, then the rest kind of falls into place. I can't speak for everyone on the cast. I'm sure there are others who have more in-depth conversations, but for me, it's kind of like, I show up on day one and I'm like, okay, what's going to happen on this episode? And we'll see where we go from there.
It seems like it seems from the outside like things are very much in sync. That it just feels like that's kind of how it flows, and like it feels like the characters, they know the characters, and you're all kind of moving in lockstep, which is part of what makes it work. Anything particular you're like, I'd love to see this happen for Joe? Like you have like wish list things, like if you were
I get that asked a lot. And it's hard because at this point we've done so much, right? Like it's like we've explored so many things, and I feel like he's grown, and I don't particularly want to necessarily make rank because there's no room for another lieutenant on our show, like it's like I think I'm very I love the space we're in, and especially since this season, talk about not knowing what you're going to be doing. Like the last thing I anticipated was revisiting sort of the core of the character from season one, and kind of
all the way now.
But what bravery on the writer's part to be like, we're going to do a 12-year callback and just talk about, you know, how this guy did this thing, and it's like we've never really resolved it, and I was like, amazing. I'm so excited to explore it, and I think they handled it really well. So it's like at this point, man, I guess I'm just excited to see how the writers manage to surprise themselves. Because you try to sit down and write one episode of television and then realize that they're doing it 22 times a year. It's ridiculous. And on a schedule that has such a high, quick turnover rate. Like it's
Brutal.
like it is a skill that I certainly don't have. And so I look forward when I get to see them do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you're right though. It's been a really interesting season for Joe. So it's hard to say. Like, I can imagine it being like,
For
I don't
everyone.
know.
Oh
Like,
my God.
let's
And I'm
just
so
see.
sorry. I'm so sorry. I have to go back because you asked about Dermot. You know, I remember when I told my wife that Dermot Mulroney was going to be joining the show. She kind of like stopped breathing for a little bit. You know, I mean, it's like Dermot, and he's kind of. I mean, God, you look at the man's resume. It is a what has he not done? You know, like it's like he has been everywhere and has done everything and worked with everyone, and you know, so it's like you figure, okay, well we're here. You know, we better tie up our bootstraps here and get ready because this guy's gonna come in and we're gonna, you know, it's like we got some shit to prove. And the thing is, he's, you know, just as much of a knucklehead as all of us. And, you know, and so it's like, that's why it just works. And there are times where him and David have become quite close. And there are times when David and Dermot are off in a corner, you know, with their backs to you, and you can't tell who's who. They look like brothers or almost the same person. But he has been such a joy, so much fun. He is exactly, I mean, he is nothing like his character. Like he's like very, very much so a very jovial, fun-loving guy to work with. I mean, you know, this is what I'm saying, man. It's like I got the luckiest job in the world. So
It seems like he just like the chemistry just worked. Like it just threw this new thing into the stew, and the stew just keeps simmering. So that's how it feels. From
absolutely. And man, I just read the end of 21. We just got episode 21. We're currently filming 20, and oh boy, are you guys in for a surprise? Like concerning Dermot's character. Like it's one of those things where you're reading and it's like your jaw drops. And it was, I think it's going to be a very, very exciting last couple of episodes.
Oh man, that's great. Well, that's a great thing to leave us on. I really appreciate you taking the time. This was fun. Hopefully we'll come back and do it again sometime once Paper Flowers is out in the world.
Absolutely,
but
my
thanks
pleasure,
so much,
man.
Joe.
Thank you so much. Yes, and please, if you guys, you know, April 12th and 13th at the Landmark on Clark Street here in Chicago, 6:15 on the 12th, 3 o'clock on the 13th. Paper Flower will be airing. I will be there, and I look forward to seeing you there.